What's up, you lazy, entitled, basement-dwelling millennials, bootstrapping boomers, apathetic Xers, and goddamn Gen Z kids today? Joining us today, we've got Cathy Cannon's fodder, depending on the order we post these things in, because we can't get our act together. You may have already met her, you may have not.
I'm delightful either way.
Either way,
absolutely.
Either way, if you're on TikTok and you hate Reagan, you've definitely seen her stuff already, or you're just interested in economics. She rants about that shit a lot, in ways that sort of make it make sense. In fact, I often go ask her questions before I make my own videos because she helps me with that.
I've had to explain it to 17-year-olds for so long that I'm like, I can make it make sense.
She is very good at it. So if you're ever wondering what's going on in the world economically or why it's Reagan's fault, she's your person. And with me, as always, is Taylor.
How's it going, guys?
I think we'll get into it. I'll let you do just your quick run through and tell us who you are for those who don't know.
I'm nerdy. What is my TikTok bio? Right, awkward teacher lady sharing her brain. Right, so that kind of sums me up.
Nice.
School teacher in Florida, teach government economics, and because of that, I drink a lot. So.
Yep, good. And you got masters and things too, right?
Yeah, a master's in educational leadership, like administration. So public policy and historical facts. All within
There we go.
Yeah, and you're definitely the highest educated guest we've ever had.
Mm-hmm.
And
but I go to the fewest parties because I draw aggregate demand curves on cocktail napkins.
I mean, we would be hanging out together.
You could definitely come to our parties.
Oh, cool. Finally.
Nobody else would want to be there. It might just be us three.
This is literally the reason we're doing this podcast is because every time we get together and hang out, everybody just kind of drifts away from us because we're, 4 or 5 beers in and just be like, you know what, man? And the problem is,
right?
Actually, it's just demand elasticity, man.
You have the economic stuff down a lot. In college, we would have definitely talked a lot about economics.
Yeah, one of my kids.
I've lost it.
Yeah, one of my kids is like, he actually got a scholarship to Yale, and he's an economics major at Yale, and he keeps sending me like his stuff, and he's like, "This is so hard." I'm like, "That's over my pay grade," but I did the theory. You can do the math all day.
Sure.
Fuck the math.
Right.
So Yale actually still teaches things, because isn't that where your governor went? And he's never struck me as overly intelligent.
Why do you have to call him my governor?
George Bush went to Harvard. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, some people just buy degrees from those schools. And I assume both of these cases are that. I am taller than him. That's my favorite thing about Ron DeSantis is that I'm taller than him. And I know that would make him so crazy. If I ever meet him, I'm going to wear, because I'm 5'9", barefoot, right? So if I ever meet him, I'm going to get like 6-inch heels. Right, and I'm just gonna like tap him on the head, be like,
scoop some pudding out for him.
He would hate me so much. That is like the thing that makes me happy. How do I know I'm doing well in life? Ron DeSantis would hate me.
Yeah, if what you're doing would make Ron DeSantis unhappy, it's the right thing to do.
And just existing
nine
in my
times out of
case.
10.
Yeah.
He's the worst.
Oh, he really is.
Yeah.
It's fun watching him flounder, though.
No. Oh, he's so dead. Like his campaign, like he's not going to come back.
Have been
from
rough.
This. Yeah,
I keep getting Facebook constantly gives me Ron DeSantis ads because Facebook does not know what to do with me. Like the algorithms can never figure me out. They're like, what the fuck is this person?
Because you're a Florida man, Minnesota farmer. Like, what the fuck even is that?
It's quite a combination.
It really is, and yeah, so I get a bunch of Republican advertisement shit on there, and a bunch of it's, and one of them was like, Ron DeSantis is up there, and he's like, they're trying to stop our movement, and I'm like, have you tried X-Lax? Because we're not going to help you with this.
That's pretty good.
Oh, he's the
Nothing
worst.
like a poop joke.
Oh my god, especially when it comes to Ron DeSantis.
Yeah, fair enough.
They write themselves at that point.
They really do. He's just a shitty person.
Yeah.
Perfect.
But anyway, enough about Florida and Ron DeSantis, who will hopefully not ruin the country any more than he already is. Let's talk about what's ruining the world at the moment.
Right. This is going to be our first foray into geopolitics, and
so
definitely a more serious topic than
most of ours.
Most of our topics easily. So I am nervous, but I'm excited to jump into this and hopefully enlighten some people.
Yeah, you've got a teenage or high school teacher Snark to help you through it. So it's gonna be just fine.
And I think it's interesting, and I'm excited that we're getting not excited that we're getting to talk about it. That's the wrong terminology there. But like
rephrase.
This has just sort of been that looming topic for centuries, but like definitely decades, generations. That looming topic over everybody's head that nobody wants to talk about because it's delicate. It's a tricky subject, and there's been a lot of propaganda around it for 60, 70 years or longer, and there's a lot of eggshells to walk on when covering this, and I kind of went into this today with the idea of I don't really fucking care about the eggshells anymore, and
It's fair. It's fair.
But I think that's the problem. The reason, part of the reason that we've allowed this, the royal we as a society, not just the United States, that it's been allowed to get to this point is because of those eggshells. And so I think it's a good topic to talk about. I'm excited to talk about the topic. I'm not excited about what's happening. It's horrible what's happening.
And to clue everybody in case it wasn't blatantly obvious, the title for this episode is going to be How the West Set Up the Middle East for Disaster. So essentially how Western countries have created a powder keg in a region that was already pretty notorious for wars and
just unrest
conflicts.
In general.
Yeah. And we, in our usual Western ways, stick our, fingers in here and there and end up, pushing over the house of cards.
It was the British Empire, though. I'm going to give it to them. I'm not going to blame America on this one. I'm going to blame the British Empire.
No. I mean, we have our fair share of blame in where it currently is. But the British Empire, stacked the deck, and then we played our hand.
Right. Yeah. I'm going to have to talk about, I have to, guys, before we start on the Ottoman Empire, I'm going to have to tell you my story about why I know so much about the goddamn Ottoman Empire. Okay. I swear it haunts me. So, my parents are British, right? So my dad used to hate how long Florida summers were, that we were out of school for 3 months. It drove him nuts because they get 6 weeks in Britain. So he would force us to do homework over the summer. And he, I was always a nerd, so he'd always give me history projects. And I was 9. I'm going to make this very clear, because it's very important to one particular part of the story. I was 9 years old, and he gave me the project of the history of the Ottoman Empire to do over summer vacation. Again, I was 9. I was in 3rd or 4th grade. No, it was 3rd grade. I remember 3rd grade. So then the end of this summer vacation, after studying the Ottoman Empire, he made me watch Lawrence of Arabia, which is a fantastic movie. I'm going to go ahead and tell you. Now that I'm 42, I can tell you it is a fantastic movie. But when I was fucking 9, it was 84 years long.
It's like going to Catholic church as a child.
Oh my God, and I am Catholic too. So I'm haunted by the Ottoman Empire. I've always joked about it. I've always made these terrible jokes. And the first school I worked at had a Turkish principal, and I was like, "What the fuck?"
I'm sure he had a very completely nuanced answer for you and quelled all of your questions.
He actually yelled at me for teaching the Armenian genocide as the Armenian genocide.
Ooh.
Mm-hmm.
What would he prefer that you called it, or
a
just
civil
not
war?
Talk about it.
No, it was a civil war, and I was like, "Sir, it's not a civil war when only one side has weapons."
Right.
I left that school after that year, just for the record.
Yeah. It was preparing you to teach in Florida, though. That's really what was going on there. Is you were being prepared for your destiny to be a Florida school teacher.
Oh, goody! I'm so glad that's my destiny. How did I get so lucky? Yay! I'm gonna drink more White Claw.
Yes.
So at its height, though. Oh, go ahead.
Mm-hmm.
No, the Ottoman Empire and World War One.
So at it. Yeah. The Ottoman Empire was huge, if you don't know. It was fucking gigantic. It was Turkey, Greece, Bulgaria, Egypt, Hungary, Macedonia, Romania, Jordan. Basically, everywhere that we fight wars for the last 20 years included in the Ottoman Empire, right? But after World War One, the Ottoman Empire, like literally, it stood for like 1,000 years and then just collapsed after World War One. Like it was quite remarkable how quickly it just fell apart. But the British, the British Empire basically took control of most of the territories. And the way I teach it to the kids is, you guys remember the Scramble for Africa at all?
Mm-hmm.
In the depths of your brain. Taylor. Yeah. He's like, I'm gonna pretend.
Not the way that's phrased, but
No, it was like where Germany basically cut up Africa into pieces and gave them to all of the European colonial people. So essentially they did that again in the Middle East after World War One with the Ottoman Empire, just cut it up into pieces, and Britain got what is now today Israel and Palestine. And it started causing problems, obviously, because they just called it something and then ignored it the way the British tended to do. So ultimately, they created 3 zones within the territory to split Israel and Palestine between the Israel's land, Palestine's land, and then neutral territory land, right? And that worked about as well as you would think, right?
And so you're talking about a sub portion of the Sykes-Picot Act, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Which basically, like forget the rest of the empire, just focus on like this little chunk, the Israeli chunk of it, right? Sure. So after World War II, they actually established the British, or not the British state, the state of Israel, right? Good sympathies from the Holocaust. Europe remains as anti-Semitic as they were before the war. And I always like to phrase it like, we didn't create the state of Israel because we liked Jewish people. It was that we didn't like them so much that we put them in their own little place, right? Which is very European of us. It's very European of us.
I think part of why, the Sykes-Picot Act was a big deal was because of the British promises during World War I in order to sort of weaken the Ottoman Empire, in that they made promises to both the Arab powers in the region and they made promises to Zionists in the West, United States. They tried to do it in Russia, which failed, but basically, in Italy, everywhere, and they promised that they would give the land to Jewish people, and they promised they would give the same land to Arab people. And that's the crux of sort of why there's, obviously the conflict had been around for a while, but they directly sent them, in a crash course.
They basically set up Crusades Take Two. Like,
I also appreciate, or I shouldn't say appreciate, I love how the UK like created this problem. Oh yeah, obviously,
100%.
And then after World War II, they're just like, so UN, here you go. You should figure out how to solve this because I don't want to do it anymore. And they just like dumped it on the United Nations.
They did. They fucked all the way off. They were like, you know what? I'm out. Like, I made a big mess. You can clean this. I'm done.
Especially the way in 1948 in Yom Kippur when they just were like, deuces, we're out.
And the UN was brand new. This was like the first thing that the UN did.
Yeah,
and
like no big
UK,
deal. Just solve this.
Like, we've got this new organization, and the UK is like, you know what? We should just drop this hot potato in their lap and see how it goes. And that's what they did. And then so the UN split up Palestine, what is modern day Israel, not very favorably to the Arabs.
Yeah, they gave all the farmlands to the Israelis. And then said,
well,
share.
they also gave 62% of the land to a third of the population at the time. So it wasn't even like remotely fair to begin with.
Yeah, but it's because their plan was to round up all of the Jewish people left post-Holocaust and sends them to Israel. Like the way they're all sending their migrants to Rwanda now, that's not a new plan, right? This is old hat for the British.
So, but it's funny because, and we'll get into that later, but that's sort of what Israel's trying to do now to, like, just kick the can further down the road. But
Irony is not lost.
When they did this, obviously the Arab people were not very excited about the way that this was split up, and they rejected the plan. They said, we're not going to go along with this, and Israel's like, no, we think this is a good idea. And they're like, we're sure you do. And then Israel's like, okay, well, we're independent now. And they're like, the fuck you are. And they invaded. And this is what I was saying earlier. We were talking and Taylor said, because I always phrase it as, Israel stole the land and in a very similar way to the way that the United States stole Native American land and then treated it as almost reservations. And then every time the reservation land we gave away, we decided we shouldn't have gave away, we come back and we're like, well, this is ours again now. They've been doing for all this time, and you thought that my use of stealing was a little inappropriate.
Well, not only just inappropriate necessarily, whatever, but it wasn't exactly. I wouldn't describe it as like stolen in that sense. I would describe it as a gift that was given by Western entities that was never theirs to give.
Okay.
That is probably more accurate.
That's okay.
But
Because
it
it's
is
been propped
funner to
up
say.
by those same Western entities. So
Yeah.
it,
So
But-
it was stolen,
but then-
it just wasn't stolen by them.
But
Right,
but then
in a way,
when they declared their independence and it was not agreed upon by the Arab nations and war were declared.
War.
Israel ended up taking a bunch of land, more land than what was ever part of the agreement to begin with.
Yeah, they ended up with like close to 70%.
And this was before Israel was a state, right? So like before Israel was a recognized state by the UN. So they took land that was not part of the original agreement, stole it. And I mean, and to be fair, the Arabs started the war, but the Arabs started the war because they're like, hey, we did not agree to this, and you can't just take our land away from us because you people who don't live here voted on it.
Right.
And
Yeah.
and then Israel's like, okay, cool. They somehow won the war, which is impressive. I'm not gonna lie.
they fought
Israel
off-
winning that war, they should have never won that war.
They fought off like 3 world powers or these 3 regional powers in that war.
But then they just kind of took everything like way more than even, so it became even more unfair in that situation.
Right. And a big portion of it, I think, that is leading to some of the flare-ups today is that there initially was a plan to have an independently controlled city in Jerusalem, and then after the war, it was Yom Kippur, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the Yom Kippur
After
War.
Yom Kippur War, that never happened. And the UN or whatever governmental agency that was going to control Jerusalem and access to the holy
The
sites,
Holy Land, yeah.
that was basically taken over by, was it Jordan and
Jordan.
Lebanon.
it was
Lebanon's
Jordan.
to the south. Jordan is to the
Yeah,
west.
Jordan took the East Bank,
The West Bank.
right? The West Bank,
Yeah,
right?
the we-
Portion of
yeah.
the West Bank, and then Israel controlled the rest of Jerusalem. So there was no just third party there to begin with when there was supposed to be. So
Yeah.
whatever happened with the UN after the dust settled and the UN not taking still control over Jerusalem, I think that was a huge failure on their part that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with Jerusalem or Israel.
Well, I mean, the fact that Israel took it and then it's just like, this is ours now, and
They took it and Jordan took it. I think the UN could have stepped in and said, hey, you guys have no claim. This was the agreements that Israel said that they agreed to, and we're going to honor that as long as Israel's in power and can enforce that agreement.
and this is oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, this is where I blame Britain, right? Because of the way you said it, Jordan, earlier, that they just like dumped this on the United Nations that was brand new, right? Essentially, Britain fucking off created the power vacuum that left these two squabbling siblings. Because essentially, like, if you want to take it back to its biblical fucking roots, this
Right.
is Isaac and Ishmael fighting it out, right? And they left them unsupervised to fight over territory they both have a biblical claim to, right? Like, this is so
Yeah.
16th century, I'm just so fucking tired of religious wars.
It's so dumb.
Yeah,
It
I
is so
know.
dumb.
But that's what it is. Like, you can't leave a power vacuum, and that's like the problem with Afghanistan.
no matter
you can't
what it
leave
is.
a power vacuum and expect good
Yeah.
things to happen.
And then after Israel won the war, because the Western powers more or less stayed out of it. The United States, I mean, in spirit backed Israel, and the UK in spirit backed Israel, but they're like, where they had an arms embargo on both sides. They didn't at least outwardly support the war effort in any meaningful way, and they really did not expect Israel to pull this off. And I think that was part of it, is they were setting up for trying to set up diplomatic relations with the people who were already pissed at them, which is how, sort of like with the Taliban and all of that now in Afghanistan, where like, we know that the Afghan government isn't going to hold this shit together, so we're going to kind of start to patch things up with the Taliban. It was the same thing, and then Israel won, and then we came in and we're like, oh yeah, no, we recognize, because we saw a opportunity to have a a power base in the region, a region that was never going to be friendly to us.
Only democracy, right?
Yeah.
Well,
Only
that and
democracy.
like the
Quote-unquote.
Cold War playing out, right? Like it's really convenient to have military allies when you're racing to freaking nuclear war, you know?
So then
Another
us,
big L by Ronald Reagan.
yes.
Not doing the nuclear armistice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so I think that's really where especially U.S. blame starts to come in at a major point is we basically then just shun. We're like, all right, now we've got our foot in the door here, and we can tell all these Arab countries to fuck off, and have a place where we can put all of our missiles and military hardware, and a place that we can gather intelligence from, and that's helpful to us. And we don't really care what happens to everybody else in the region, and we really needed some humanitarian, diplomatic power balance going on there, and we did everything but that. We just we came in and wrecked up the place. So
Yep, and part of it is that like sidebar conflict. Like you remember the Suez Canal conflict in the 1950s, right? Where the British were
I have that in the notes.
yeah, right? Like that is where America took over for the British Empire, right? Like they threatened to call in the war debt and they're like, back the fuck off for this, right? So part of me thinks that like America's just steadfast commitment to Israel, as convenient as it is politically and like whatever, militaristically, it's a little bit like I can do what you couldn't do to the British Empire, right? Like I can hold Israel, I can hold the Middle East, and we're not doing as good as we think we are. That's where I'll
Right. I mean, I think Israel was the United States' first kind of dipping the toe
Yep,
in the
of foreign
waters.
policy.
Really, I don't think we made a huge push to be that superpower until we basically took over the Bahrain, just off the Saudi Arabia coast. But yeah, I mean, obviously that's when we were like, yeah, we can do this.
Sure.
We can totally prop up this government no matter what it does, and say that they're right.
Yeah.
And the problem with that was that there was never any resolution. So, like, after all the big wars that we've had, like after World War II with Germany and Japan, we had resolution. We came in, we had set terms of surrender, we had set out guidelines about how things were going to move forward. We helped what was our enemies rebuild and do all this, and created, for lack of a better term, a new world order and a new structure of alliances. And economies, and that never happened with this. It was a war that ended but never really ended. It was just Israel got the territory they wanted and was able to hold it, because then we stepped in and we're like, okay, now you've got this and we're going to help you hold it. But there was never that resolution, and so the violence just kind of continued, and it was a war that never really stopped. It was just a war that went cold and hot repeatedly through the 60s, 70s, and 80s. With the Suez Canal, and
I think this is where you start to see what we consider modern day terrorism essentially be, which before the state of Israel was ever created, that was the thing, but I think it really became like the hot button issue, especially for the West, and sort of the beginning of what like we view terrorism is the.
Well, as the Cold War as the Cold War was winding down, this became more important, right? Because we had to, like, when the Soviet Union broke up, they had all the stands, remember? And we had to have a strong presence in the Middle East in order to hold the satellite states independent. This is where the war in Ukraine comes in, right? Like, all of this is tied together because this is essentially America's efforts to stop Russian encroachment on this region, right? That is why we have Israel. That is why we care about Ukraine. That is why we care about the European Union.
It's why we went to Vietnam. It's why we went to Korea.
It's why all of it, right? Literally everything. Like, America versus Russia is at the cornerstone of everything for the last 100 years, essentially. And like the kids always ask me, they're like, because I explained to them how World War II wasn't really won by America, it was won by the Soviets, and they're like, well,
I will argue this one.
Here we go.
I didn't mean to do this, but like, and I always tell them, and I was like, but the reason that we have to paint it the way we do is because we can't enter into a Cold War against the other like major superpower and talk about the military prowess of our enemies. We have to like build American patriotism. We have to sell ourselves as the heroes to the world. We ended the war, not them. We liberated.
Exceptionalism.
Yeah, exactly. So we had to downplay the Soviet role in World War II big time to sell the idea that America deserves to be the superpower. He's gonna yell.
Can
at me
I
now.
say though? Because I am. Yeah.
This is one thing that Cathy, I think we agree a little bit more on than me and Jordan agree on. But go ahead, Jordan.
All right. So, I more Russians died in the war than any other force. Yep. But you don't win wars by dying the most. Like that's not usually a good battle strategy, right?
But they liberated
Okay.
all the concentration camps.
Oh my God, they had all the concentration camps. Remember, Russia was Hitler's ally
Oh boy.
for the beginning of the war.
No, they weren't. Huh? They were like, they weren't allies as much as they were like, I'm going to do my thing, you're going to do your thing. I won't stop you from doing your thing if you don't stop me from doing my thing. And then they fought over Poland and all hell broke loose.
They didn't fight over Poland. They invaded Poland together. Hitler invaded
first, so Soviets followed and said, no, fuck you. Like, they agreed nobody could have
that
it.
Wasn't,
and Hitler
that
tried
wasn't,
to take it, so Stalin was like, fuck you, no, I'm going to take it.
That was not how it went down. This one.
Okay. I think
we have diverged.
Cathy, we're gonna bring you back. We're gonna bring you back. We're gonna have a whole episode.
It's gonna be Cathy and Taylor versus Jordan.
Oh my God, I'm fine. I'll take 2-on-1 on this one. I am a World War II history buff.
Hitler bombed my granddad's house. Like literally, that's what. Like when I used to complain about stuff as a kid, my granddad would look at me and go, "Did Hitler bomb your house?" No, he didn't, Granddad. So it was shut the fuck up, basically. Okay, I'll shut up.
All right, we'll save this for another one. You're gonna have to stick around for a third episode.
Pin in it. For sure. Pin in it.
All right.
Well, so I feel like we've fairly well described sort of the history. Yeah. I think of where we're leading up to today.
Yeah. I do want to point out that through this history, so again, there's agreed upon territory that we've had in the Middle East between Israel and Palestine and the Gaza Strip and Lebanon and Egypt and Egypt and Israel eventually made peace in 1979, right? So like
because
that's kind of been
David
the balance. Because of the Camp David Accords.
Jimmy Carter.
Jimmy Carter. Again, Jimmy Carter, if we would have gotten him again, there may be peace in the Middle East today.
What's his name? Egypt.
Kyle would have sniffed Cartman's fart. Too. South Park joke there.
No, what is it? What's his face? The Egypt guy might not have been assassinated in the second Carter administration. I had his name in my head, and then Jordan made me laugh, and I forgot it. So.
Way to go.
It'll come to me randomly. I'll just blurt it out in a minute when it pops back.
It's perfectly fine. So they made peace, and that was kind of that was the mediating forces, Israel and Egypt. Then once they finally came to peace between the Palestinians and Hamas and all of the kind of disputed territory in the West Bank, Gaza Strip, and Israel just has sort of kept ignoring those agreements and building. There's 144 settlements today in the West Bank and Palestinian territory, and this is why I say it seems so apropos to compare it to the United States and the Native Americans, because it's like, hey, this is territory we agreed you can have, and this is where you're allowed to be. And it's like, wait, no, there's resources or space here that we want to use now, so we're just going to use it, and you can go fuck yourself.
Yep. And
because Israel's like that cocky little kid with the really big, tough big brother, which is us.
Yep.
That's like, what you gonna do about it? And anytime they do something about it, they're like calling their big brother, and big brother, even though we don't necessarily put boots on the ground there, I mean, we provide them with pretty much all of their military hardware, and they have some of the best military hardware and intelligence and technology in the world.
The fourth largest army in the world.
Yeah. Because we give them that stuff. And so, I mean, it's and again, and this is where I say, the U.S. still holds a fair amount of responsibility for the situations here, because we have perpetuated these issues in favor of people who, there is some pittance owed to how things happened, and reparations probably should be made in some form or fashion on territory and access to the Holy Lands and everything like that. That we're just like, you know what, Israel, you can do whatever the fuck you want, and I mean,
Yeah, like that's
No?
that's kind of how it went. Like to your analogy that you made, Serbia and Germany, World War I, is very, very similar in dynamics to Israel and the United States right now. Basically, like I'm gonna go like wave my dick around, and I know I'm gonna be bailed out by this giant military power, and that had a good outcome too. So we're really good at repeating problems.
We never learn.
I never learned. I swear, history rhymes.
So that's where we're at today now.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Obviously, there's a whole lot more in every year, every decade leading up to that. And if you want to, really widen your horizon, look into just the whole Middle Eastern geopolitical situation, starting from World War One.
Clear your calendar.
I was gonna say, prepare yourself emotionally because it's a lot.
There's some really good content out there on YouTube. I know because I just spent the last 4 or 5 days watching it all, so I can make some recommendations if anybody would like some. But basically, the big reason why we're talking about this today is because of the recent attacks by Hamas on October 7th, in that they launched a pretty major offensive for them and targeted some military features, but also did a lot of damage to a civilian music festival where over 260 people were killed. In just that one small portion of the attack, hundreds of people were taken hostage, and it's been pretty bad. Since then, things have been really, really tense, and there's back and forth attacks still happening right now, and hopefully things settle down, but things are not looking great in that sense. Things are still really volatile.
Yeah, I think the last I looked, they were up to 2,000 dead between Israeli and Palestinians in retaliatory attacks. It's a mess.
I think it was 2,200. I looked this morning.
Yeah, that's I think the number I saw.
1,000 on one side, 12 on the other side. Yeah,
that's I think the number I saw as well. But I was in SAT testing hell all day, so my brain is goo.
Yeah.
But Jordan, I was kind of talking to you about this yesterday, I think, when we were texting. That my dog, do you hear him? See how pitiful he is? He's so pitiful. He's a feature on our podcast too. It's not official till Rocky cries, so it's official. Rocky has cried. But I have explained this to people about how this exact moment got here is kind of a consequence. And I guess this is where we could blame it on Reagan if you wanted to, is a consequence of Afghanistan and Iraq, right? The post 9/11 response here, because we have that like big brother relationship with Israel the same way, right? Is after 9/11, the world really rallied around us, and we came out with that like hard and fast, we stand by and support Israel, like fuck you, right? And the whole world just sort of let that be, and we went into Afghanistan and then Iraq for 20 years, and being so distracted there, we couldn't manage Israel the way Israel needed to be managed, right? Like the Clinton era was really good at kind of keeping a lid on it, if you will. Like, and they came close to a 2-state solution back then. Remember with Clinton and Arafat and everything? Like they were minutes away from it. It fell apart at the end. But when we diverted our attention from that and just like steadfast commitment to Israel, no questions asked, and nobody bugged us, for 20 years, what we didn't notice happen was that the Israeli government got increasingly nationalistic, increasingly right-wing, and increasingly fascist themselves. So now what the conflict is it's two extreme right-wing nationalist theocratic regimes fighting each other for the same territory that their respective God, which is the same one, I'll point out, promised to them both. It's
just whose kid is the right kid.
Yep. And it's really sad because like I was trying to explain it to the kids today, because Gen Z, I don't know if you know this, are very pro-Palestine, right? And have been for a long time, for a couple years now, that they've kind of shown like Israel should be nicer to the Palestinian people, and 100%, like I'm there. But that's hard to do right now, because like when you're starting to see the type of violence that's coming from Hamas, and like on one end I can understand it, because when you're oppressed for so long, right, like go back through history.
How long can you be pushed?
Right, like peasant revolts, slave revolts,
radically violent.
Exactly. Like on one end I get that, but on the other end, like it's hard to defend it in real time. Right, it's a lot easier to defend it from like the annals of history, if you will.
It really is indefensible.
I want to add another caveat to this that I think is important. Is these are people without a nation, right? So like the Palestinians don't have a country. They don't have a government, a necessarily
supposedly Hamas is their government. Which if a terrorist organization is your government, then you don't have a government.
And
but that's the thing is they don't have an official formalized government, an official formalized military. They don't have where Israel has all of that.
Yes.
Right.
So how do you fight a world power backed by a world superpower when you don't even have a country? You know what I mean? And it's like, so I'm not condoning the terrorism of Hamas or Palestine in any way, but I am saying that if they're going to fight this in, using violence forward to do this on a battlefield, they don't have the other options. They don't have tanks. They don't have planes. They don't have, cruise missiles and rockets and all they have.
Yeah, let's just say be 100% clear. The people of Palestine are not Hamas.
No, I know.
And they're just there, and they are using Palestinians as a human shield. There is no doubt about that. And one stat that I was watching all the news channels this weekend, and one thing that really struck me was Israel's report on Hamas's strength capabilities, and they have basically like 100 anti-tank missiles and like a couple thousand handmade missiles and 10 to 50,000 troops. And that, to me, it struck me because there's over 2 million people living just in the Gaza Strip alone,
which is like 25 square miles or something, isn't it?
Right. It's like the size of Rhode Island, but like way more highly densely populated, or smaller than Rhode Island, whatever.
It's tiny.
It's tiny.
Point, yeah.
But so my thought was, if the maximum, troop estimate that Israel could come up with, which I'm sure that if they could come up with the conservative estimate and they say 50,000 as the top, 50,000 out of 2 million people, that's like basically nothing.
Right.
So like this is a incredibly small minority of people who have gone to these lengths that are not representative of any people.
No, and that's I think a great point to make, is that the people of Palestine are not terrorists, saying that Palestinians are terrorists, and this is kind of that whole anti-Muslim, anti-Arab rhetoric that we've had in this country and in the Western world since 9/11. But I was just trying to put forward the point that you're looking at a place that doesn't have a group of people that don't have a country. And if the Gaza Strip was a country, if Palestine was a country and they had a formalized government and a formalized military, we would be looking at these attacks very differently. We'd be looking at them more in the sense of Ukraine and Russia versus a terror group and a formalized state that we support.
Yeah, and there's leftover war on terror energy here too.
Absolutely.
But here's where I think it really went wrong. Like, where Hamas, I think, fucked up big time here is the atrocities aside, right? Like, from a geopolitical perspective, where I think they fucked up is that Benjamin Netanyahu is not exactly popular, and the American government, like, is a little divided on him particularly. Like, we steadfastly support the nation of Israel, but we don't currently like their present moment government, right? So
I mean, just look at the statements from like Ilhan Omar criticizing the Israeli government.
Yeah. So like,
there's clearly people within our government.
Yeah, and like, and if they were,
she's probably not the best example in that particular. I mean, I love her. I'm not saying that, but she's in this particular topic of government perspective. Ilhan Omar is probably not the best.
Isn't there a Palestinian citizen who's now a representative?
Jamil, what's her name? Rashid Jamil, I think is her name.
Yeah, I think it's we really should have that down.
It was Anwar Sadat, by the way. I remembered his name.
Anwar Sadat.
Okay.
There we go.
I knew it would pop up eventually. But like, the angle I think they should have taken, and this is why I'm kind of concerned, like I was saying to you, or maybe it was Troy, I don't remember, but like, Iran backs Hamas in a lot, like, not the way we back Israel, but they, like, whatever. And we don't know that Iran is involved. If they are, this is a whole different conversation, right? So
U.S. has denied and they've denied.
Yep.
It's really, but everybody assumes they're part of it.
And even if it's just in, like, egging them on,
funding,
right?
or
something like that. But like, Hamas would have been well suited to recognize that Joe Biden has 50 years of foreign policy experience, right? He's an old man, but that means he's been here since like 1970. Like he was a senator during the Camp David Accords, right? Like he was a sitting senator when Sadat was assassinated, right? He knows this conflict. So, and he's not a fan of Bibi at all. Like Bibi and Biden, not good. So had they not gone full fucking guerrilla warfare killing civilians, they'd have had a chance to probably work with the Biden administration to actually get some progress, because if Biden had an excuse to get rid of Benjamin Netanyahu and create stability in Israel and Palestine, like you don't think he would have taken that?
Oh my God,
in
a second.
Walked
It's like the
to
biggest
re-election.
dub you could ever have.
Exactly. But instead they go freaking shoot up a concert, and like to Americans who live in a nation of mass shootings, that's a good way to trigger our deepest trauma, right? And then they're calling it their 9/11, which is a good way to trigger a lot of trauma. And they're trying to do that. They're trying to use.
Oh my God, absolutely.
Yeah, and it's gonna work. It's gonna fucking work. And
Yeah, because there's no other option for the United States to take now on this thing than to back Israel to some extent, and that's going to be. I mean, and we were going to back Israel to some extent anyway, but how much we were willing to try to broker peace in this situation, and I do think that that's an excellent.
Yeah, I mean, there's no way that Hamas comes out ahead in this.
Not
I
anymore.
don't. I can't see how Palestinians would look at this and be more in favor of them. There's no way that militarily they're going to hold up against the Israeli forces.
No.
yeah.
I just don't see it any way that they come out ahead in any way.
But can I be like a gross political consultant for a minute?
Absolutely.
Like, I know this. Like I want to preface this with I am aware of the sensitivities of this moment and the atrocities of war, and I do not condone any such things. But I also used to run political campaigns, and I can't help but kind of like gear shifting to that. And Joe Biden just won re-election.
You think so? I mean, like, I was kind of feeling it anyway, just because of you thinking everything. If your front runner is probably going to be tied up in 47 different court cases.
Well, not only like Trump aside, doesn't matter who he runs against at this point, because Joe Biden's foreign policy chops are what put him on the ticket with O'Biden. I just did that again with Obama.
O'Biden.
with Obama, right? Like this is where he shines.
That's the first one.
I know. Like he actually shines when it comes to foreign policy, because just like he's really good at the retail politics, at the connecting to people on a personal level, he's that way in diplomatic negotiations as well. So like he's already toned down Israel. Like Israel is a little bit responding to Hamas right now with that knee-jerk reaction that we kind of had when it was like drop nukes on Afghanistan in the immediate days following 9/11. But he's like, as bad as it is, it could have been worse than it is right now. You can kind of see Israel like backing down a little bit from their turn Gaza to rubble. I mean, they've turned parts into rubble, but they have the capabilities that if they wanted to, they
could level Gaza.
They could have done.
Can you imagine if Trump was president now and this happened?
They would have, and I think.
I mean, there would be nothing.
And
left.
I think that's.
And we would be in a world war again.
And I think that's the exact conversation, because Republicans have been holding up Ukraine funding, but now it's really, really easy because. At large, we've all been very much trained to support Israel, right? Like, you can't not support Israel in America, right? Like, the Daily Show used to make jokes about it a decade ago. So, like, now, like, you can tie the Israeli conflict to the Ukrainian conflict. You can point to Hamas being backed by Iran and Russia working with Iran, and you can't let Russia take over Ukrainian territories, because then Iran has a more powerful ally, and then Hamas wins in Israel, and it's just so easy to put together now. So any Republican fighting support for Ukraine has now abandoned Israel, right? And you can sell that on the American campaign trail easy. You can tie the funding together so you can actually stop any Russian progression. And your point, what would Donald Trump have done? He'd have fucking leveled Gaza, and what would that have done? That would have caused World War III, right? So Republicans have been trying to play the hand for years that it's like they're the anti-war party because they're not supporting the war in Ukraine, but no, that is gone now. That, like, no, you are not, and we can prove it to you very much, because you would lay waste to 2 million people, and we're gonna talk them down from a cliff, effectively.
I will say I probably agree with you for the most part. I want to see more from Biden. I don't think that he's come out really against the state of Israel at all.
I don't think he will.
No.
Yeah, he won't.
But I think that's the only way we make progress out of here is working to correct the wrongs of a state that is a that has stewardship over millions of people.
Right, but that's
and
part
have
2.
done wrong.
Yeah, but like right now, like
Yeah.
after these
Yeah.
attacks, that's
Yeah.
part 2. That was the
Well, so,
primary concern before, but now it's stop the bleeding.
Sure.
You know.
I'd like to see Biden follow up on that sort of stuff.
me too.
I don't think he's done enough yet.
Well,
to
also
win.
to that point, I think it's actually good that we haven't heard a lot from him. Like he's come out and he's basically called it pure evil,
Yeah.
right? He's come out and like backed our
Right.
support, but the fact that he's not on TV talking to us a lot means that he's on the phone talking to them a lot, and he's not going to put anything out there to the American people to feed the frenzy until he has and that's like the more quiet he
But
is,
shouldn't he
the more
be-
progress I think he's making.
Shouldn't he be hosting campaign rallies? You know,
And
speaking
fundraising
on, like,
off of it, obviously.
how great of a job he's doing. Okay,
Obviously, and talking about how Trump would have made this a million times. Obviously, he's doing all that wrong. But
how he's gonna solve the problem in 30 days.
yeah, that's all of those things. But that's what I think. Like this has given Joe Biden a chance to do the thing he is literally the best at a very critical moment when Republicans literally can't elect a speaker. Right?
Yeah.
So
No,
that's
I will
where
give
we're
you
at.
that. I do think an important topic to cover on this, because talking about how you can't not be an American and not support Israel, and this has always been one of those difficult things, because anytime you come out as critical of Israel's actions, the very first knee-jerk reaction to anybody who is not appreciative of what you're saying is to call you anti-Semitic.
Yep.
And that,
Which-
tying exactly, but tying a government and a nation to a religion, and saying, well, if you're criticizing the government and the government and the nation is based around a religion, then you are criticizing that religion, which is obviously untrue. But I think that that's done a ton of damage, because that's a lot of people just won't touch it. Like, I'm not going to come out and criticize the atrocities that Israel is committing. I'm not going to come out and criticize the fact that they are going back on all of these territory agreements and just putting up these settlements. I'm not going to come up and say, criticize the fact that they're building these giant walls that are obviously not doing anything for foreign relations. Because if I do, I'm going to get called anti-Semitic, and anti-Semitic is bad, and then I'm going to get, canceled, for lack of a better word.
I think it's telling that it took a decade of Netanyahu's basically blockade and forced prison for international human rights groups to call it apartheid.
Yeah.
It took a decade at least for international human rights groups to call it that. And I know it's been that bad for at least that long.
God, it's been as bad. It's been that bad since they got there, and Israel has been an independent state.
Right. I think all you have to do is go back in the last decade to show that Israel's stewardship of the Gaza Strip is, to put it lightly, less than not good.
It's very
And
bad.
to put it back poorly, it's on the brink of genocide, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, you can't say anything, because if you do, then it's anti-Semitic, and that ends up being I mean, it's like, in the United States, getting called racist is one thing, because people argue that that's been overdone, and and people get desensitized to it. But the anti-Semitism one is not quite the same. Like, people haven't been desensitized to that in the same way. Where,
well, and there are still a lot of hate
Absolutely.
attacks and hate crimes against Jewish people.
anti-Semitism is a huge problem.
It's
Huge.
still a
Always
massive
has been.
massive
Huge
problem.
problem.
But that doesn't
Well, it
that
makes
doesn't
it-
give the an extra life card.
Right.
To,
It makes
to
it worse.
Israel.
It makes it worse, because the people who have suffered such oppression and such persecution, literally biblical levels of oppression and persecution for millennia, are like, you know what? It's our turn now. And I mean, and it was, they did it in the Bible too, right? If you want to believe the stories anyway. But I mean, like, it's one of those things where it's like, they should be being empathetic in this situation, and it's the opposite.
And to paint a picture for some of the people who have not done a lot of research, this world's largest open air prison, that's a real thing. We're talking about the Gaza Strip completely walled in, completely blockaded. There are no flights. There are no shipments. You're very restrictive and who can come and go, what sort of shipments come and go. It's a really crazy thing to get a work permit to just work in Israel if you're living on the Gaza Strip. They have basically over 90% of their water is undrinkable. They do not have water. Their electricity, they basically get a couple hours a day, and then it's blackout for the rest of the day. They rely extremely to an extreme extent on Israel to provide them with food, or at least allow food shipments, anything to come in. So they are essentially being held hostage.
Yep.
They are being held in this prison by Israel, and I think that's also one of the biggest reasons why we have an issue like this coming up, is that Hamas is. They are saying now enough is enough. I don't think that they're freedom fighters in the sense in that they're fighting for Palestine in this way. No. They're not doing it in a way that's actually going to help Palestine. But what they're saying, where they're coming from, is not wrong.
Right. They have a valid point.
Fighting for are not inaccurate issues.
Yeah. Like the issue I have is like oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just to say, like, to put it into a perspective of the way that, like, we can understand, Western countries can understand, is the Berlin Wall. Like, imagine the Berlin Wall on steroids, because that's what's going on there.
Bigger,
and like
taller, higher tech.
Yep. That's actually
more
a really
surveillance.
and more. I mean, more persecution. I mean, what was going on in between East and West Berlin is it would look like a humanitarian dream compared to what goes on between Israel and Gaza.
Yeah.
Like.
Yeah, like
so sorry.
Like the takeaway point I have from all of this is like clearly there are issues with the Israeli government, and clearly there are issues with the Hamas's leadership, right? But like you said, Taylor, like the Palestinian people are not Hamas any more than the Israeli people are the Israeli government, right? And it's the people that are suffering in both of these cases. And we don't win wars with warfare anymore, and we haven't in a very long time. You win wars with diplomacy, and that's what's going to be necessary right now. But what can't be lost, and what's really hard, is because there's so much anti-Semitism, right? Like, it's hard to separate the nation of Israel from the people of Israel to a certain group of people. And because of post 9/11 trauma, it's really difficult to separate Muslim people from Muslim terrorists. And those are the competing, like, ideologies, I guess, that are playing out in everybody's brain as they're watching these terrible atrocities. And, like, yikes. It's just, like, at the end of the day, we just have to remember that it's people that are suffering because of corrupt leaders on both sides of this. And this is a mess bigger. Like, if people are going to blame Trump for it, nope. People are going to blame Biden, nope. This is bigger than any one person. This is more than 100 years old. This is arguably millennia old. This is something that we need unity on, and we should get the fuck over ourselves a little bit here. Marjorie Taylor Greene, Matt Gaetz, all of it. Like we need some perspective here, because there are 2 million Palestinians that are going to die, and I don't know how many people live in it, but there's a lot of people whose lives are at risk if we can't get our heads out of our asses, because unfortunately they rely on us to stay alive, all of them.
They do.
Yeah, and I was speaking earlier to just, I have this foreboding feeling that things are unfortunately going to get worse before they get better.
I agree.
And I've looked at a lot of stuff from other people who have sent me some information, and people have sent me like tweets from Hamas leaders calling for a jihad over the weekend here, and to basically calling for blood and calling for like financial assistance,
both, like,
to help them.
We need to kill people,
like,
so
fight
send us
this
money.
war. Yeah, and you know, and the Israeli response, in that cutting off electricity, fuel, and food supplies, and ordering a complete siege,
not a good look.
And then calling the Palestinians that they're fighting human animals. Like, I don't see doesn't feel like a rational. on top of the Israeli and Hamas response, or just like their next moves, the U.S. response in moving that carrier group and offering additional ammunition to Israel, I don't think that's a big deterrent for either group. I think that they're probably calling America's bluff that we're gonna actually come in here and do anything with that freaking nation invading force. Like it's not meant to.
Yeah. Or invade a 25 square mile
Right.
section of
Exactly.
land, and
One carrier group is said to be able to take over like entire nations, and that's what we have out there to fight like this tiny little group. I don't see that really carrying all that much weight. I think the extra ammunition for like the Iron Dome ammunition is there's no doubt that should be given. That's a purely defensive tool, so I don't think anybody who has issues with preserving life has issues with us, extending that hand.
So do you want to know my theory on what I think is going to happen?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yeah,
So we know Iran is sort of backing Hamas, like not officially, but right. That's the whatever.
Sure.
And we also know that Iran doesn't really care about Hamas. They're self-serving and see them as a useful tool for their whatever. And we also know that Iran really wants their sanctions lifted. So if I were Joe Biden, I would be speaking with the Iranians and say, if you withdraw your support from Hamas, totally, completely, whatever, back the fuck off, right? We'll lift your sanctions. Let us solve this problem. We'll take care of Bibi because Iran doesn't like Bibi either, and we don't like Bibi, so there it is. So you guys stop funding Hamas, so they're easy to take out. We'll take out the terrorist organization running the Palestinian state. We'll remove the fascist leader of the Israeli government, and we'll broker a two-state deal. And if I were Joe Biden, that is what I would be selling as my re-election campaign, because that's better than nuke the Gaza Strip, I think.
Yeah.
I can hear the response from the Republicans, and I don't know, for me, just my
They'd call us soy
reaction to
boys.
that
That's
is-
what they would do. They would call us soy boys.
my reaction would be that you're essentially just giving now a green light to the world's greatest sponsor for terrorism.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they're only that to piss us off because, like,
No, this is true, but if you're selling this as a political selling point, because we
Slam dunk.
don't even know that. I mean, we have no concrete factual basis to say Iran is absolutely funding this or doing, like, we don't know
this
what they're
particular
doing, if
attack,
anything.
right? But yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That's fair.
So to come in and say that we're going to give Iran concessions for something we don't even know that they're involved in would backfire, I think, tremendously
Maybe.
on.
Plus, I think Iran still has its mission of instituting an large Islamist state nation over the Middle East. I think they are still going for that. I don't know if it's much of a goal as it was in the 80s or whatever, since the revolution. But
I don't know. They have their own kind of
I
issues
don't think that
happening
they-
there, you know?
I don't think they've changed that much, unless, I mean, obviously there's a lot of like protests in Iran and a lot of stuff done to civilians
And like
that
the
are
civilians aren't really
fighting
on
against the
yeah,
oppression.
exactly. Like the civilians aren't really on the side of the Iranian government any more than the Iranian.
No.
Like, and that's what I'm saying. Like, there's a
Yeah.
people's revolution ready to happen here, and good diplomacy could take advantage of it. But to me,
Sure,
like,
sure.
did you guys watch Game of Thrones at all?
Yes.
Okay, so you know what I feel like we're living in right now is that that scene where Tyrion is meeting in Marine with like the Slaver's Bay people, telling them like cut off your funding for the Sons of the Harpy. We're not funding them, sure, but you'll cut it off all the same. Sorry, threw my pen at myself. That's I think Iran and Hamas, right? Like Hamas are the Sons of the Harpy, Iran are the Slaver's Bay, like whatever, and we are Tyrion Lannister. We just need some dragons, so that'll solve it. That's all we need.
Yeah,
We just need.
we've got lots of
we need a
dragons,
sexy
honestly.
bitch on a
Apaches,
dragon.
baby.
Apaches, F-22s. The F-22 is a fucking dragon.
I think the dragon is like a nickname for Apaches.
I don't think that's the case.
And that's what
Some
got
sort of
Slaver's Bay.
helicopter.
It's like,
riding the dragon.
and all those guys backed off. So I'm just saying, that's what
Yeah.
we do.
Well, anyways, I think, does anybody have anything else crazy? I wanted to sort of like lead into our sort of the last point is, where do we go from here, from a political solution, if there is one, because war is clearly, it has not been the answer, and it doesn't seem like it's going to solve anything in this conflict.
It won't solve anything, that's for sure.
Right.
Harking back to Carter in this situation, I really do think that a modern Camp David Accords
Say that too.
solution is the solution. You have to bring, and whether, you got to drop the I don't negotiate with terrorists bullshit
Because we do.
rhetoric. Right.
And
We
we
do.
always
We
have.
always have. There's never been a time we haven't. And when we say we don't, we do it the most because then we have to give concessions under the table to make it look like we're being strong.
Which is what I think Biden would do with Iran in this case. You know what I mean?
Right. Bring them to the table and say, all right, Netanyahu, whatever happened to the days, I mean, I know we always look at this as a bad thing, but whatever happened to the days where we just went and, like, sent the CIA to assassinate leaders we didn't like and then just put up new ones that we did like?
I knew that's where you were
I was
going.
going to say, that's very Reagan of you, Jordan.
I was like,
But we used to do it all the time. Now I feel like
in the Reagan era.
It wasn't just a Reagan
we've been
era.
doing that since the beginning of America.
That's always been our MO. And then, like, recently we're just like, we're not going to do that anymore. And it's like, it's not a good thing to go about, but when you start doing it, it's like heroin. It's hard to stop, and then there's consequences when you do. The withdrawals.
I think,
did you just make the assassinations are like heroin reference? I just want to make
yes,
sure
I did. I absolutely did.
And with that, I'm opening another window.
Yeah, no, I wish I had another bush right here, or something stronger,
or some heroin.
Here's a hams.
Perfect. Love it.
But no, Camp David Accords bring leadership from Hamas, bring leadership from
or the PLO,
Israel,
get old PLO leaders, because Hamas is fucked.
There we go. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I think you need to bring representation from all the parties. Well, I don't know that you necessarily need to have Hamas, to be honest. That's
what I'm saying.
I think if you're successful in any sort of political solution, it excludes Hamas's existence.
Like you need Palestinian leaders.
That is fair.
Hamas, right? That's what I'm saying. Like find some leftover PLOs because they're there, right? Because this is George Bush's fault. Remember when he's like, let them hold elections at a politically tense time where they're, of course, going to vote for the hysterical,
Well, they didn't even do that. It was like a 50-50 essentially,
and then,
and then just like Hamas was like, "Oh, I got it."
Close
well,
enough.
we have guns. Like that's what they said.
Right. So we're sort of this Camp David Accords. Where does that lead us?
Well, so that brings them here and say, all right, we are going to come up with a solution that is fair to both sides, and it's going to feel very unfair to Israel. And sorry, Israel, you've had your time. You have abused your power and our power backing you. And it's time for you to make some concessions, make some reparations. You need to make this right. And if you don't, we're going to make you do it. So it's going to happen one way or the other. Have this talk of now we have to be the responsible big brother. We've been the irresponsible big brother, letting you be the irresponsible little brother all this time. It is now time for you to atone for your actions. And we are going to have to, tear some walls down, give them some space, give them some reliable energy and food and, access to the rest of the world, and move forward from there. And
so
just be like,
are you suggesting like it's still a two-party state sort of situation?
Yeah, the two-state solution is I think you have to do it. Like that's
what else are you gonna do?
Because Israelis won't lead Palestinians fairly, and Palestinians won't lead Israelis fairly, especially after this. So they need their independence from each other.
I guess I had the thought in that, especially with the proposed introduction of Jerusalem being controlled by an independent entity. And I told Jordan this last night, is that instead of two parties, which I think that's more difficult than it sounds, to create two equal states as far as resources and
you're never going to create two equal resource states.
Difficult, of course. That's why it hasn't happened.
And I don't think, I don't think that creates an environment of cohesion in the long run. I think that maybe that creates peace for a while. But there's, the lines that have been drawn are still there. You're just sort of putting a Band-Aid on it. I personally, honestly think that we need whether it's UN backed, probably, and I would ideally be UN task force completely taking over the entire state of Israel and just make one state where the UN basically sits there. If they have to sit there for 10 years, for 20 years, a UN military task force to fight any sort of terrorism that flares up, I don't care whatever it is, but have them basically facilitate the government to move towards a representative government that treats all the citizens between Israel and Palestine as equals, and essentially creates, the ability for Gazans to assimilate into the same areas where the Israelites have been able to, live and settle.
I got a question with that though, is how do you make that representative government happen? Because you'll end up with a very similar situation to what we have, is you get a majority party that then sets up the entire situation in a
Well, I think the UN sets the stage to what is potentially fair or unfair, or at least is a checks and balance to, like you said, a potential political party getting massive control of power, and that the ability to set the stage poorly. And I'm not saying it's easy, but I feel like there needs to be a big guy standing there saying stop and stop.
Maybe, but to me that just sounds like cut up Germany and let Britain have this piece and France have this piece, and
There's no cut up. Instead,
he wants it to be everybody, and hoping that if we just tell them to sit down and get along long enough, they'll eventually sit down and get along.
No, I mean, half of the biggest issue that the Palestinians have right now in the Gaza Strip is that they're being treated as second or third class citizens. So you have a UN-led independent state that is open to all religions, that treats no citizen like they are third class, second class. All citizens should have the same access to water, electricity, job opportunities. Basically, make it so that there's no way that you can have like discrimination against a particular religion, and you have to hyper analyze a lot of these things. And
but
we created the mess.
we absolutely did.
I
feel like we gotta try.
That's
something.
gonna get sold as like what is it? International occupation, like that. That's what they're gonna call it, and
that's what it would. I mean, that is essentially what it would be. We would be coming in from the
already,
Western world and be like, "This is
is
what's best for you, and this is how you're going to do
It
it."
already
British
is
Empire
international
on this,
occupation. It already is international occupation, just with the leader that is not internationally derived.
Right. Okay.
So
that's fair.
We're basically taking out the government of Israel and making a UN-sponsored, as much equally as possible, derived government to eventually be taken over by the people that are not of one particular religion or the other, and hopefully does not have an extreme power vacuum against another.
It's very idealistic, and I would love to see that happen, but like our own country, for example, has centuries at this point of building that kind of equality policy on things like, and because women's rights is a huge thing, LGBTQ rights is a huge thing, as far as religious rights and equality is a huge thing, that they are, we are backwards at this point on a lot of these things, and they are centuries behind us on this across the board. And to say that the UN's gonna, set up shop for a couple decades, and bring them up to speed even remotely close to where that is a possibility seems. What's going to stop the insurgents, the terrorists from continuing to be like, I don't like this Western intervention, I don't like what they're trying to push for us either, and doing the exact same thing they're doing now?
Yeah, no, that's why I also think there needs to be a large military task force that's UN based, that's unbiased military force.
So Afghanistan.
No, I don't think that's the same.
Oh, but is that not what we were doing in Afghanistan this whole time?
Well, I don't know.
That was like what we were doing in Afghanistan, like 80s and 90s, right? Like.
Nation building, right?
Yeah,
that was the.
But I mean, but that's essentially what you're saying here is nation building,
I'm
military
advocating for that over the solutions that are available. I don't know that I feel like there's not a better solution available in considering both just all the groups and parties involved. There's too much going on for anything but the most strict.
And I think that's the issue.
International mandate.
Yeah, I think the issue is that there's not an easy solution, and especially at this point, like as shitty as it sounds, we might have to like let it play out a little bit to know what the next best move is, and that sucks because like it's not going to play out nicely. But I don't really.
And lots and lots of people are going to die.
I mean, if you run the thought experiment of saying, well, let's just let it play out as it goes right now, and our sort of unequivocal support for Israel,
It'll go back to the status quo.
it'll go well, and the way that the Israeli, representatives and parliament members are talking right now, we're talking about a lot more deaths and not a lot of solutions.
Yeah.
No,
Their goal is just let's just get rid of Hamas. Well, how's the best way that we've ever gotten rid of a terrorist organization?
Yeah.
How has that gone for any government?
we're the best recruiters for the terrorist organizations we're trying to get rid of.
Especially a terrorist group that is in Palestine, the most difficult area, where you step wrong and you're breaking down an apartment complex that is maybe one Hamas person owns, like an apartment in the basement. Like, this is the absolute worst environment to try to fight a terror group.
Well, especially because these two groups of people don't see each other as human. Like, Israelis do not respect Palestinians. Palestinians do not, like, and there's not a lot we can do about that.
I would challenge that for the normal citizen.
Well,
I would challenge
that's fair.
that for.
That's fair.
Oh, but I mean, as a normal citizen, you still get if the people in your neighbors, your friends, your family are killed in an attack that comes across the wall, across the border. I mean, it's like again, you want to say as a normal citizen, but we didn't see the people in Afghanistan as normal citizens by and large as a country. To this day, a lot of people still don't.
Yeah, and we're not neighbors either.
But
though.
they're also in their post 9/11 hysteria, right? Like they're going to be at their most extreme,
And that's what I'm saying. I don't see this like ending with any actual solution. So either we allow this to perpetuate, or we do some major action. We do some actual boots on the ground.
Where I'm gonna go? Oh no!
Sorry.
Bad words. Bad
we're
words.
Millennials. We don't like that. We don't like that.
I know.
This is where I go back to the Camp David Accord style. The sit down around a table, bring all the affected parties, the people who are actually having to live in this region, the leadership from them, the people who have a vested interest, and be like, we're gonna work this out. We see where you've been slighted. We see where you've been slighted. And play therapist, play peacekeeper, and be like, you guys are going to come to some sort of agreement that has to, and in the end, benefit us because we're America, and that's the way it works. But figure your shit out, and then when you sign on the dotted line, we enforce it. That's where your UN step in comes in, as in you agreed to this and you agreed to this. So if Israel oversteps, all right, now you have a right to say that the United States or the UN needs to step in and put Israel in check because they signed on the dotted line, they agreed to these agreements, and vice versa with the Palestinians and the rest of the Arab nations, because honestly they're all kind of still involved. And
I mean, if that works, I'm happy to do it that way. I think that my proposal is certainly the most heavy-handed and involves the most resources and is probably the most painful. We've tried what you said before, and things didn't change, and Israel backed and sort of went against agreements that they originally agreed to in the past. I'd like to see that happen.
Here, I'm gonna one up you, right? I'm gonna go regime change.
All right.
Boom. I'm going the Bush years. I don't think anything's possible with Benjamin Netanyahu as the Prime Minister of Israel.
Absolutely not. No, he needs to, and that needs to be a you are stepping down. How would you like to step down conversation with him between
resignation or Gaddafi? which would you prefer?
Yep. How do you want this to go down?
And I hate saying that because like I lived through the Bush years. Like I hate saying it, but like, and I'm not saying boots on the ground overthrow the Israeli government. I'm saying bully Bibi. I mean, he's going down for corruption charges, and he's fucking Israel's Donald Trump. Like, we just need to get the Israelis to handle your shit. Like, get him out of here, and we'll go from there.
He was probably on his way out before all of this.
But I saw a headline today that he's
he
forming
has
a
been.
coalition government with his opposition, and like that's exactly what. Remember George W. Bush's approval rating hit like 82% right after 9/11. Like he's gonna ride this.
Oh, he will, and that's the problem. And
'Cause
this
he's
is
the
where
problem.
this is where Biden's foreign policy, if he can stop Netanyahu from doing that, that's the win. If Biden can be like, all right, Netanyahu, you got yourself into this. You need to step aside and let cooler heads and smarter people and less corrupt assholes fix this problem for you. I don't know that Biden's going to do that.
That's why I think like his little covert negotiations with Iran, right? Like, if you stop funding Hamas, I'll figure out how to get rid of Netanyahu, because that's Iran's issue too. They don't like him either, and I think Iran would cool the fuck down with him gone, right? So we'll lift your sanctions if you can help us get rid of Bibi.
I don't know. I don't know on any
I
of
don't know
it.
either. It's bigger. It's over my pay grade, you know.
I'm not a I don't run governments.
This is why I teach high school, man. Like,
Right.
How often do you get people? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
But I was trying to find solutions from both sides today. I was trying to find third-party solutions from news, whatever, and nobody.
There isn't one. There genuinely isn't
and that's
one.
the point. Like, if there was an
Everybody
easy
avoids that point.
solution, it would have happened 100 years ago. It would have happened 50 years ago. It would have
Right.
happened 20 years ago.
Right.
There's not an easy solution because the problem is bigger than any existing person or government.
Yep. And the problem is that we're thinking that we are going to figure out the way to solve it,
Exactly.
which goes back to, okay, regime change. Like I said, it's like heroin. You got to do it every once in a while, right?
See, you're calling for assassinations. I just want the fucker to resign.
Yeah, I don't think there's a.
That's why I'm the pansy ass little bitch over here. That's what
I don't think you get a cohesive government on the next stage by assassinating.
No,
Like,
no.
definitely.
And I'm being very facetious. Netanyahu's caused a lot of problems for us in the region for a
us.
a
while.
long time, more than a while.
No,
It's on top of the Palestinian people.
Yeah.
I get that. Why I was posing the question as to why hasn't the U.S. done what they normally do
Yeah.
in those situations?
Because it's Israel.
Because it's Israel.
Yeah.
That's the correct answer.
And that's a fair point.
That's the correct answer.
That is a fair point.
And we're somewhat out of the game.
I do
out of it. Wink,
and I do want to be very clear. I was being very facetious. I am not advocating the assassination of
Yes,
foreign
I
leaders.
know.
For all the people on the internets and the interwebs,
Don't
I'm,
come for
I'm
Jordan,
not
man.
advocating. Yeah,
We're nearing the end of this, and we're getting a little loopy. I think.
yeah,
Like, I'm too White Claws in, man.
yeah. This is just it's the way it goes. I don't think, and I think that us trying to solve this, because we can't solve a problem that we don't fully
Exactly.
understand either. And we don't fully understand the position of either of the parties involved, even though we created their position.
Yeah, I have no issue starting with like a Camp David Accords and trying
from
that
there.
way, and with us doing a little bit of a heavier involvement and a little heavier hand militarily, and saying we will not stand for this warfare and this violence because it's not productive for either sides, and bombing apartment buildings and mosques and telecommunication infrastructure, like that's you're not stopping Hamas by doing that.
No, you're recruiting more of them. Is all you're
recruiting more.
doing. You're just every time you blow up, somebody's house,
You're creating a new terrorist.
We know that better than most.
Yeah, we're we're the best Taliban and Al Qaeda recruiters in the history of the world. So
the royal way, not like the three of us.
Yeah.
To be
Yeah,
clear. To be clear.
That'd be
to be
giving,
clear, the United States.
be
and
giving ourselves a lot of
Yes,
credit
exactly.
there.
I have so much power. Look at me go. Yeah, but all I'll say is that we should all be really fucking glad Joe Biden's president right now, not Donald Trump.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think there's a doubt. I
Because-
don't see that Trump handles this in any sort of nuanced manner.
There's no nuance in that
And,
man's life. Like,
No, not at
So-
all. Should we bring back Henry Kissinger?
no, fuck
He
you.
was
I'm gonna
always
punch you.
with
in the-
these things.
I'm gonna punch you in the face. Why don't we just get Winston Churchill while we're at it? Fucking hell. Put Winston Churchill, Dick Cheney, and Henry Kissinger in a room and watch the world burn. Right?
And, Rumsfeld
fuck
too.
you.
and
Mine as well. Mine as
Yeah,
well. He can be the secretary taking notes.
everyone light one and watch it go. Right?
the minutes person.
Oh,
Just read the minutes.
Well, that was
well,
uplifting
I
and
think we
fun.
should-
I'm so glad we did that.
That was good. This is, I think, our longest podcast yet, which deservedly so. This is a
Deservedly
topic
so.
that
And I guess just to leave it at, our hearts go out to all the citizens of the Israeli government, Israeli people, and the Palestinian people, and obviously we hope that things come to a swift, at least the violence comes to a swift end, and cooler heads are able to prevail.
hopefully that this is a turning of a page in world history that will be turning in a better direction than it has for all the previous chapters. Looking back, and hopefully the violence is atrocious right now,
really sad.
and I'm hopefully not the violence solves anything, but hopefully the reaction from it does solve something, and we can find a real equitable solution for this, because it's terrible, and it's something that's really easy to ignore, because there is no easy answer, there is no obvious solution. And
you heard their reactions to my solution.
yeah, exactly.
So all of our
three
solutions,
people who
none of us liked any of our choices.
Right. No.
three people who genuinely agree on like most things,
Except
and we're
apparently
sitting
the
here
Soviet
arguing.
Union.
Oh my god, we're having a fucking conversation about that one.
Definitely coming back. If anything, I'm just gonna grab a 6-pack and I'm just gonna watch
this
it
is-
live.
This is what happens at the end
Watch
of-
the world
This is
burn.
what happens at every end of every podcast episode with Troy and Irene. Rocky is like, okay, you are done now.
Rocky. Such a cute
He's the
boy.
best boy. Come here. You want to see my bestest boy? Come
The
here.
best, the
Come on.
goodest
Come
boy.
on.
Oh, the goodest
Now
boy.
he won't because he knows I want. Come on.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
Well,
yeah.
my dog hates
Stage
being on
fright.
camera. You put a camera in her face and she'll run away. She
This
knows.
one, like, he's so
She
cute. I try to
knows.
take pictures of him, and he instantly goes to his like
Mm-hmm.
stoic stank face, like the judgmental dog.
being,
He's the happiest boy in the world, unless I take a picture of him. Then he's just judgy as shit.
Yeah. They always want to make you look bad.
No, anyone would think I never played with him. Like, that he's the most neglected creature in the world. He hates the vacuum cleaner, though.
Well, Cathy, it's definitely been a pleasure meeting you and talking with you.
Yeah, I'm
and,
here for all the warm
we definitely
fuzzies,
hope to
right?
have-
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely hope to have you back.
yeah, because we're
fun.
Jordan. I'm telling you,
Well, there's that.
we got to talk World War
We're
II.
doing this one. we are going to talk World War II. She will be back to talk more warm fuzzies about why.
But at least not
World
modern
War II
conflict,
is
right? We're just gonna go into the history
Yeah.
of this one.
All right.
the conflict that led to
Yeah,
all
exactly.
the modern conflicts. But yeah, thank you so much once again. Cannon's Fodder. Follow her on all the socials that she
things.
participates in. As we are Let Them Eat Toast, her podcast is Just Buy Less Coffee. You notice we were destined
know.
to be
Great
together.
minds, great minds.
Yeah, please follow her. Thank you so much for coming and wasting White Claws and all of your time with us talking about things we can't change. We appreciate it. Again, thank you so much for Taylor for doing this with me and being, really the backbone of this whole operation, because I can't even figure out how to invite people
And I screwed
to
up the
Riverside
sound,
to make
so.
this. So we appreciate it. Thank you to absolutely everybody who listened and stuck through this long, painful conversation this far. We appreciate it. We hope we keep making better and better content for you guys, and you guys keep enjoying the podcast. Again, give us feedback if there's anything you want to hear, want to see, want to talk about. We love y'all. We love you, Cathy. Thank you so much, and we will see you guys next week.